Hi everyone. Self-love. What is self-love? So I don't think self-love is looking at oneself in the mirror and believing one is the epitome of humankind. I don't believe it is thinking that one is superior to anyone or in everyone. I don't believe it is behaving as if you are superior to others. I think part of self-love is recognizing one's own shortcomings for what they are and accepting those that one can't change. You know, if there is something fundamentally wrong with your behavior and you keep doing things and people keep saying to you, that's so not cool, you can accept that in yourself. But eventually you'll be saying, well, nobody loves me, everybody hates me. And then you'll start questioning why. Well, one would think you would start questioning why. So I think self-love is accepting what is wrong with one and modifying it or changing it in such a way that, I don't know, I suppose that you don't think it's a train smash or a failure. So, see, I'm learning this myself, so I don't know. I could use an example of a growth on one's face. Self-love could be accepting the growth as part of oneself, or recognizing that there is potentially a medical intervention that could repair it. So, for example, you grow a giant wart on your nose. Do you love it? If you like it and it doesn't bother you, then I imagine self-love would be accepting that that wart on your nose is a part of you and therefore it can stay. If you grow a wart on your nose and you look at yourself and you hate the way it looks and you hate the way it makes you feel, then self-love would be going to seek medical intervention to potentially have it removed or treated. Now, not all physical disabilities are treatable. And some of them one would need to accept as being a part of oneself, and one would have to learn how to love that part of oneself. So, if there wasn't a way to remove the giant wart off your nose, and you accepted it, and you loved yourself in spite of it, I mean, you wouldn't highlight it and put glitter on it so that everybody looks at it, but it wouldn't bother you because you would recognize it as being a part of yourself. And I struggle with this. Clearly. I mean, I was man down for a week because I couldn't do my hair. I couldn't do my hair. How pathetic is that? So, self-love would be recognizing one's own belief, one's own, I don't want to use the word shadow because at the moment it's overused all over YouTube and Facebook, and everyone's doing shadow work. 9 times out of 10, the people don't even know what shadow work is. Accepting a flaw in your physical being would be recognizing that part of yourself that doesn't accept the flaw. So maybe if I used an analogy like an extreme temper tantrum. So someone does something you don't like and you throw a temper tantrum. And later on, you look back and you think, well, that was unnecessary. I didn't have to throw a temper tantrum. I didn't have to stomp my foot or, heaven forbid, punch that person. It wasn't necessary. I didn't need to throw that object across the room. It wasn't necessary. It was an overreaction. And in recognizing that, self-love would be to try and correct that behavior. So, to correct the behavior, you need to establish where it comes from. You know, it's all good and well saying, oh, well, next time I won't throw a temper tantrum. Well, you probably will. You probably will. Because whatever it is that, and another word that's overused at the moment, whatever it is that triggered the temper tantrum is going to trigger it again and again and again and again. It doesn't matter how much you say, I won't throw another temper tantrum, until you've recognized the trigger, accepted the trigger, and learned to love that trigger as part of yourself. Hence self-love. Well, that's my pop psychology on it. Mine. So, where does one even begin with it? Well, I suppose the first step is to recognize the behavior. And I'm going to stick with temper tantrum. So you recognize the behavior and then you look at what it was that triggered that behavior. So, for example, you go to the supermarket to buy something and they don't have stock of what you want. And you throw a temper tantrum. You become what speak now is, or internet speak is, you become a Karen, or a Karen, or however the hell they pronounce it. And you bitch and complain to the staff and the management and every Tom, Dick and Harry because your favorite brand of toothpaste is temporarily out of stock. And a few days later, you need to do something and you end up standing in a queue for a few hours. And as you get to the counter, they close. And you throw a temper tantrum. Because I've now waited for hours and you have closed. How dare you? And you throw a temper tantrum. You are on your way to work and you're running late because there's been some form of hiccup on the road, whether it be a traffic light that's out of order or an accident or whatever the case may be, and there is a traffic jam, and you throw a temper tantrum. And every time you throw a temper tantrum, you write down what it was that made you throw the temper tantrum. And eventually, once you look at it all, you'll discover that your trigger is actually frustration. Because you running late, you become frustrated. You stand in a queue waiting, you become frustrated. You specifically go somewhere to buy a specific item, it's out of stock. You get frustrated. So the internal emotion is frustration. And what is it about frustration that makes you throw a temper tantrum? Well, it could be that when you were a child, you tried and tried and tried and tried and tried and couldn't get something right. And when you threw a temper tantrum, you got it right. So your learned behavior is that after frustration, a temper tantrum resolves the situation. And it's actually funny, I'm quite subconsciously using this because I found with myself, I get frustrated when I'm not understanding something. I don't throw a temper tantrum. I get very frustrated. I get angry, but I don't take it out on anyone. I actually get angry with myself. And the longer I battle, the more grumpy I become. Until eventually, I sit back and I say, well, why don't you try this a different way? And then lickety-split, and I've solved the problem. And then I look back and I think, well, what was all of that about? Why didn't you just do it like this in the first place? Why didn't you ask for assistance or ask the question that you needed to ask in the first place? Why battle on your own until you become frustrated? Then you get angry, then you ask, someone gives you guidance, and you do it and it's done. Why not cut out the middle bit? Why not try to do something, recognize that you're not 100% sure, ask, see if the solution works, if the person can assist, and if they can, do whatever it is they suggest, and if it works, your problem is solved. So you cut out the battling on without asking for help until you are at the point of becoming agitated and angry because you can't do something. Self-love. Recognizing your own failure. Recognizing that you aren't omnipotent. Recognizing that everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And just because you can't do something doesn't mean somebody else can't do something. Or just because somebody else can't do something doesn't mean you can't do something. So instead of allowing the trigger to happen, you recognize what is creating the trigger and work at healing the trigger. And yeah, it sounds all airy-fairy, wave a magic wand and boom, trigger solved. No, it doesn't work like that. There are some monumental triggers. Post-traumatic stress disorder, chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, those are severe. Those triggers are monumental. And it takes a lot of work, a lot of patience, and a lot of self-love and acceptance to work through them, because you actually have to work through them. There are a lot of schools of thought on trauma, on how you, hello Dini, on how you resolve PTSD and CPTSD. Ultimately, the only person who's going to be able to work through it is you. You need to want to, and you need to be able to work through and recognize what it is that is upsetting, what it is that is making you feel and believe that you are in danger, because CPTSD and PTSD are trauma triggers. And there are so many trauma triggers out there. And there are people who have more than one trauma trigger. You know, people who've suffered chronic abuse. You don't even want to begin to imagine how those people battle. And please don't get me wrong, I respect the professionals who work with those people. And I say those people as if I have never experienced trauma. I have experienced trauma. I've experienced different trauma. I haven't experienced the trauma of war. You know, the Vietnam vets who end up living on the street don't do that because they want to. They do that because the trauma inside their brain, inside their muscle memory, is so severe that they cannot function. So tread gently on trauma. In fact, don't tread gently on it. Tread gently with it. Because the causes and long-lasting impact of trauma can be devastating. They really can be devastating. The simple love yourself and it'll go away isn't going to work on that. Recognizing exactly what it is that triggers a cell memory, a muscle memory to the trauma may start. But to get there, first you've got to love yourself. You've got to love yourself enough to want to be able to heal yourself. Excuse me. So self-love is fundamental to every aspect of my own journey. And I can only speak for myself. I cannot speak for any other human being out there. And the acceptance aspect of self-love is something that I battle with. I really do. I battle to accept that I'm good enough in most things. I know I am good in some things. I know I have strengths in some aspects. But because of the mental coaching as a child that being proud of oneself is vain. That is a trigger. It's a trauma. I play down any achievement because it doesn't matter how good I was. It really doesn't matter how good I was or am. At the end of the day, I know there is someone who is better at it than I am. And I'm certainly not going to run around telling people that I'm the bee's knees. It's not going to happen. What I also don't do is accept the fact that I am particularly good at certain things. It's funny, I was driving my friend somewhere, or he was coming somewhere with me, and he remarked, "Will you teach me how to drive the way you drive?" And I said to him, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, your reaction and reflex to things is so quick. You almost see it happening before it happens." And when I thought about it, I realized that I look ahead. I am an overthinker. I am a planner. So I look at all potential eventualities when I'm driving. I keep an eye on the car 3 cars ahead of me, and I keep an eye on the car 3 cars behind me. And no, that doesn't mean I ignore the first and second car ahead or behind, but I keep an eye on it. Because when that vehicle reacts to something, I need to be able to react immediately. And the reason for that is because I was a bit of a hooligan, and I enjoyed driving particularly fast. And I had a particularly fast car. And I had to react very quickly because I drove very fast. So I kept an eye on everything on the road all the time. I sit as a passenger in a vehicle, and people driving, while speaking to you, they will look away from the windscreen. They will look at you. And I think, what are you doing? Why are you looking at me? Look at the road. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at the radio. Don't look at the bird in the sky unless you're stationary. Look at the road, the traffic, the people, the movement on the road. Because it takes a split second for something dreadful to happen. And invariably, I don't travel with those people again. I will do it once. But I won't do it again. Unless they drive particularly fast, in which event I figure if they have an accident, they'll probably kill me anyway, so it won't matter. But when he said to me he wants me to teach him to drive the way I drive, I was actually quite stunned, because I never had anyone tell me that I drove in any remarkable way. I never had anyone tell me I drove in any remarkable way. I had an ex-boyfriend once who pulled up the handbrake while I was driving, and I controlled the vehicle and prevented an accident. And he criticized what I had done. And I said to him, you touch any control in my vehicle while I'm driving ever again, you will never get in the vehicle with me again. But he didn't say to me, well, there you go, you actually managed not to prang the car, well done. That would have been the correct response. Not telling me what I had done wrong, because at the end of the day, I had actually done everything that needed to be done to prevent an accident. So I had actually done it right. And it's that type of thing where one's own belief in oneself becomes completely skewed. Completely skewed. Because people do things and say things to make you feel bad about yourself. They do and say things to make you feel bad, to make you feel as if you aren't enough. You know, if you're driving a vehicle at 50 kilometers an hour, 60 kilometers, I don't know what it is in miles, and somebody pulls up the handbrake, the car is going to spin. And you need to control the spin. I did have one passenger. He had had a particularly bad motorbike accident. He was a work colleague and friend. And it was raining very hard. The roads were very slippery. And the robot changed. Probably it was too short for me to stop safely, but it was too long for me to go through. And I had to stop. And I had learned in wet, you do not slam on brakes because you'll skid. My instinct, my arm will shoot out to protect my passenger. And then I will tap, 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 because I anticipate what is coming. And when I dropped my work colleague at home, he looked at me and he said, I expected us to have an accident. Where did you learn how to stop the car like that? Well done. And that was probably the only other time I've ever been commended on a piece of driving. So my view of my own ability is skewed because I've been driving for over 30 years. And in over 30 years, I've had 2 car accidents. 1, 2, 1, 2. And that 30 years is pretty good going, bearing in mind that I used to drive long distances. I used to drive at all hours of the night. I used to drive when I hadn't been sleeping for 3 days. And when I say I hadn't been sleeping, I mean I was at work. And after a major implementation, I would drive myself home. And one of the accidents actually happened on one of those nights. And it was raining that night. And in spite of all of it, it was a single vehicle accident. I managed not to hit anybody else. The witnesses said, how on earth did you do that? And it wasn't, I mean, the accident itself was obvious. But they had no idea how I had recovered it. I have no idea how I recovered it. I think it was guardian angels. I think I've got a troop of guardian angels looking after me. But be that as it may, in 30 odd years, I've had 2 people commend me on my ability to maneuver a motor car. 2. I've probably had 100 men tell me how badly I drive, tell me what I've done wrong, tell me I was too slow pulling off at a robot or stop street, or too fast, or I took the corner too fast or too slow, I didn't change gears quickly enough, or I changed gears too soon. Probably at least 100. And 2 in over 30 years tell me, well done. So my self-concept is battered by other people, because even though I know I can do something, and I do it almost automatically, I doubt my ability to do it because so many people have told me I'm not capable of doing it. So, yeah, we have this self-love concept that we have to work on. And I guess accepting the bits and pieces of myself that I can't alter or learn away or accept. Gosh, how do you accept something you can't accept? How do you accept something you can't accept? I suppose one would have to modify it until it becomes acceptable. But I think the first step is recognizing it. And I think in the self-love stakes, I've recognized that I don't love myself, so that's a giant leap ahead for me. And I'm still not talking about standing and staring in the mirror and thinking I'm great, or touting all my abilities and talents to every Tom, Dick and Harry and behaving as if I'm superior. I'm still not speaking about that, because that is not self-love. Most of the time, that is narcissism, and it's actually more narcissistic personality disorder when you chuck the whole lot together. Unfortunately, the word narcissist is thrown around all over social media. It's off the wall how many people are suddenly narcissists, when realistically every single human being has at least 2 or 3 of the diagnostic criteria according to the DSM manual, which would point towards narcissistic personality disorder. But to have narcissistic personality disorder, you need to have more of them, and it needs to be consistent. So thinking you better than one person once in a while is not narcissism. It is one of the character traits of narcissism, though. Manipulating something in your favor is narcissism, but it's not narcissistic personality disorder. It's one of the traits of it, yes. So, are you never allowed to manipulate anything? And if your answer is, no, you may never manipulate anything, I'm going to tell you bullshit. Because even when you cook food, you are manipulating ingredients to make something. So, is every chef diagnosed as a narcissistic personality disorder individual? No. But living one's entire life manipulating people, bullying people, taking, stealing, lying, cheating, scheming, conniving, believing one is superior, etc., etc., etc. Yes, that is a person with narcissistic personality disorder. That is not somebody going about their normal day where they see something, they realize if they do something slightly different, it changes the outcome. So they do it slightly different. That is manipulation. Where you say something slightly differently, that is manipulation. You are manipulating your words. You are not manipulating somebody else's words. You don't turn around and say, oh, you said you hate me, when the person said, I dislike this characteristic that you have. That doesn't mean you hate the person. It means you dislike a characteristic of that person. Manipulation is turning it around and saying, you hate me. Narcissists and children do that. So, self-love, not the narcissistic kind, not Narcissa, who stared into a lake at his reflection, not that, but a deep love of who and what you are and who and what you can be. An acceptance of one's flaws, I guess. Flaws, that's the word I've been looking for. An acceptance of one's flaws. An acceptance of one's own weaknesses. One's own foibles. And acknowledgement of those that one can change on one's own. Those that one can only change with assistance. And those that unfortunately are so deeply embedded, it'll take a long, long time to change. That acceptance, that self-love. Anyway, that's enough prattling today. Have a great day now.